Okay, hello. My name is AJ. I'm a GMAT Club member, and I'm here to welcome you to GMAT Club's MBA application walkthrough. Sorry, we should be a little late with this session. Um, this is a 6-week series. The MBA application walkthrough is a 6-week series covering applications to top 25 MBA programs. Every Thursday and Friday for 6 weeks, we'll feature admissions experts and admissions teams going step by step through every aspect of the online application. Be sure to subscribe to our channel, GMAT Club, to stay updated and support us in organizing more events. I'll be your host, and in today's walkthrough, we're covering Yale School of Management, together with these Alan Carniel, Senior Consultant at Vantage Point. And Alan is a Senior Consultant with Vantage Point and at Yale SOM MBA, so this session is near and dear to his heart. Alan has over 7 years of experience advising MBA applicants with happy clients who are now current students and graduates of Wharton, INSEAD, and Yale SOM, among other top programs. As an MBA admissions consultant, he focuses on uncovering his clients' underestimated talent and crafting exceptional applications with attention to intricate story details. The application form is an overlooked place for this. Welcome, Alan. It is great to have you.
Well, thank you for having me, AJ, and thank you all for waiting a few minutes for us to start. And welcome folks from Brazil, Chicago, Harlem, New York, all the rest. So today I'm going to talk about SOM. And the reason I ended up at SOM was actually because I found the school to be kind. I knew that I wanted the business skills, but SOM has a very different energy to it to other business schools I was familiar with. And so for me, it felt like a very obvious connection. And for the folks who go there, the students who go there, there's a very deep kind of resonance with the culture of the school. So definitely, if you're interested in SOM and you can visit, do visit. If you can't visit, I encourage you to talk to the students so you understand the ethos of the school. And when you're going through your application, they will sense your knowledge of the school and your relationship with the school. So just a quick background of Vantage Point before I dig into SOM and this application. We are a top-ranked boutique MBA admissions consulting firm. That means that we basically distinguish ourselves on a high-touch service and paying really close attention to our clients' needs. We really want to be a partner in the application process. We're really also very thoughtful people, intentional people. And the reason is that we're on a mission not just to get applications done, but to transform lives of students like you. So if you do want a consultation with us, you can just go to vantagepointmba.com and request a consultation. So just diving back in SOM, it's not a huge school. It's about 250 students in a class. You'll see they've got high GMAT, high GPA, but as Bruce Delmonico shared, they also are sort of looking at other things, not just the numbers. What they're really looking for is smart, driven, and interesting people with not necessarily a 100% plan for their future, but some sense of where they're going. But the really, really important things that are different is throughout everything that you do, you want to express that you really care about the world and making a difference in the world, and you're excited about the school and the ethos of it. The mission of the school is to educate leaders for business and society, and we take that very, very seriously. There are folks who will start in business and then move into government, or start a nonprofit and move into business, and vice versa. It's very, very much a school of people who want to do good and do well at the same time. And the dean of the school had this really great quote that said, "The mission reflects a distinctive way of looking at the world. We believe business and society aren't separate, but that basically in order to be an impactful leader, you have to look at them together." All right, so that background, if it doesn't resonate with you, this isn't the right school for you. And if it does resonate with you, definitely get in touch with students and connect, because your application will be stronger when you talk to students and when you understand what it's about. And they make that very, very easy for you. So in terms of the application itself, there is a hidden essay in this application. So like all applications, don't wait until the last minute to get started on it. There's actually one sort of essay and then less formal pieces in there that you really want to work on. Just be consistent throughout the application in terms of how you write your answers. So full sentences or bullets, but don't kind of go back and forth inside a section. And in terms of other things, we'll dive in here. Let's see. All right. So taking a look at the application, hopefully you all can see it. And the other thing is, if you do have comments, feel free to share them. I see a couple more folks kind of jumping in and sharing where they're from. So welcome from, wow, Nepal, Midwest, everything else. So the first thing it says is we offer an MBA application guide. So this, there, you just click on that link and it will take you to a very simple guide, and it shares what the intention behind every single section of the application. So for example, it says that the purpose of the test scores is a piece of larger picture. Work experience is to show your achievements. Bruce, who runs the admissions office, he is a, if you heard him speak, he's a very direct, very high integrity person. So if he says the purpose of post MBA interest is to communicate your career goals, that's what it means and nothing else. All right, so definitely take a look at the MBA application guide. It's very helpful. Besides that, you'll see the dates, and don't be afraid to kind of reach out if you get stuck in terms of questions. They just have information. So that's this first page for you here, just to sort of get a sense of things, and of course, just the disclaimers. All right, so the other thing, I'm not going to kind of dive into this statement of honesty. I think this is pretty standard, but obviously you want to be integrity, do your own work, and everything else. If you bring in advisors, just know that they are advisors. They're not doing the work for you. All right, so let's look at personal information and kind of dive through this piece. And let's see, nothing here that's too unusual. One of the things that you can see that, so SOM really cares about the diversity of its students and making them feel comfortable. So even in terms of gender identity, you'll see that they've got banned more gender identities, non-binary women, and that if you were feeling self-conscious about self-identifying, you could put in one here and change it later before you matriculated. So I think it's part of the ethos of the school of being welcoming. The other things you'll see is just additional information, a couple quick things here. If you are a current member of the military, they'll ask for more information. If you were dishonorably discharged, like all things, when there is some sort of challenge in your career setback, you're going to want to have a very brief description of what that negative event was, and this is the first one. I will come back to that in a little bit when it comes up again. So SOM has a number of joint degree programs. There's probably, it's one of the nice culture pieces of the school is that you've got a large contingent that come from the School of the Environment, formerly School of Forestry. You've got students who are learning how to run theaters through the Yale School of Trauma and lots of other things. So it does add a really neat part of the school just to have so many students with diverse backgrounds. If you decide while you're there and you're really into sustainability that you want to add on an environmental degree, you can do that after you've matriculated SOM and vice versa. So that is kind of a nice kind of cultural piece. But if you're not doing a joint degree, there isn't that much to it. And separately, you have to be admitted to every school to which you apply in order to do that joint degree, I believe. But you have to check that one. All right. So, and feel free. I'm going a little fast through this first part, but if you do have questions, just let me know. All right, so in terms of academic record, one of the nice things that'll save you just a tiny bit of money is you don't need to submit an official transcript, just a copy of it, so you don't have to wait for that. You only have to submit it when you are accepted and to choose to enroll. This is another important piece, is in terms of GPA, if your GPA is not on a 4.0 scale, do not adjust it to a 4.0 scale. And this is really important, especially if you were outside the United States. Let's say you have a 100-point scale and the curve is different and they grade differently. Just having a different scale is going to indicate that difference. So
sorry,
yes,
don't
go
mean
ahead.
to interrupt. We
Please.
lost you for about 10 seconds there when we talked about reporting GPA. If you want to, reverse it a little bit.
Oh, great. So in terms of reporting GPA, if your GPA is not on a 4.0 scale, don't switch it to a 4.0 scale for them, especially if you're from outside the United States and it's on a different, United States schools and universities grade differently than other places. We tend to be a little bit more generous in terms of our grading, which means it'll very much play against you to try to switch that scale, but do explain what you're after. There is obviously a lot of math and financial education and statistics and accounting that comes with an MBA. If you don't have that background, they're going to ask you to go to math camp, but it actually wouldn't be the worst thing to make some new connections before business school starts. If you had to do that, that would be that would actually be not a terrible thing. SOM offers a couple of degree programs, including a Silver Scholars Program, which is a direct enrollment from undergrad. So if that's the case, we'll get back to that. But diving into this disciplinary review section, if you might have had something happen, like let's say you were caught drinking in your dorm freshman year and you were underage, that may or may not be something that the school has actually written up and placed in some sort of sanction or anything else. Chances are it probably did not. So, unless it's on your official sanctioned transcript or record, you can just click no for this, because it was just it wasn't of that level of item. All right. So if that was the case, basically make sure that that doesn't show up. If something did happen, the best thing you can do is own it and fall under and basically kind of, fall on your sword. So for example, due to some, basically I had a semester in which my grades really fell off due to some challenging circumstances in my personal life. You can say my grandmother, who I really was close with, passed away. Since then, you can see I have an exemplary record. So whatever it is, try to be honest, short, simple with your explanation. Do not get fancy with it or anything else. Same thing here in terms of if you, did something stupid like and got a misdemeanor or anything else, unless it was, best thing to do is just fall on your sword. I was hanging out with I made a bad decision when I was young, and as a result, got this, and it was really, I see it as a learning opportunity, and it's no longer part of who I am. So definitely fall on your sword, be honest, be mature, do not get detailed. Maybe a sentence or two is all you need on that. All right, so most folks don't have to deal with those things. And now if you take a look in terms of test scores, you'll see that there are pretty high test scores for the average SOM students. And by the way, it does go by SOM as opposed to Yale SOM. So if you're writing your application, you don't need to keep writing Yale SOM. That'll save you some words. You can very much just do SOM. One of the things that you'll see a comment on is that if for some reason your quantitative score was lower than you'd like, you can, basically try to show other quantitative ability through your academic record. You can add additional comments in the supplementary essay or things like that. But there isn't anything too fancy here, just basically the 5-year mark in terms of making sure that's in. All right, so let's get into the meat of this presentation here, the work experience section. And if you do have any questions, by the way, feel free to reach out. If you have a situation that you want to discuss, feel free to reach out. I'm happy to talk you through any of those things. That's the really fun part of this. Okay, so in terms of entering dates and salaries and employment, one of the things to see is that if you're admitted, they will do a background check on you. All right, so make sure that whatever you put in is factually accurate, because they're going to check and make sure that what you have is factually accurate. All right, so here's where I can kind of get into some more juicy things with you and everything else. And let's take a look here. All right, so if you work for whatever the name is of your company, you can put it in here. However, let's say you work for a large bank like JP Morgan or JP Morgan Chase or something like that, right? Instead of putting in just JP Morgan Chase, right, you could put in something more specific, like JP Morgan Chase, public finance, investment banking. So that way, instead of communicating what the entire JP Morgan Chase bank does, you can talk about what your specific experience is there. All right, these other pieces, we don't have to get into too much. So this is another interesting piece in terms of starting position and ending position. Let's say you were, again, back at JP Morgan Chase, and you started out in their retail sales and trading, doing processing transactions, so back office support. And then you moved over to, again, to their public finance investment banking group. I would actually list those as two separate descriptions for your for in here in terms of employers, because they are two very distinct jobs. They might not even be in the same building, even if they're within the same company. So if your roles are that different within the same company, you can basically list the single company as the same employer. But if you went from like an analyst to a senior analyst, or an analyst to a consultant, or something like that, associate to consultant, you can keep it definitely within a single job description. They are looking for upward progression in terms of compensation from one job to the next as well. So if you, for some reason, decided to switch roles, switch careers, and there is a step down, then you're going to want to talk to that in terms of your reason for leaving the job. All right, so let me dive in here and give an example of what this looks like. I'm going to complete this public finance role, and let's take a look. All right. So I am imagining this public finance, which is like helping city and state governments issue bonds. And so this is financial services, investment banking. All right, and the job function, we'll see finance, public finance. All right, so direct reports means people who you're the boss for, and indirect reports means people who report all the way up to you. So this company description, again, this giant group for JP Morgan Chase, you're not going to want to put everything that they do in here, right? So you're going to want to basically describe the language in a way that reflects the work that you've been doing. All right. So this is what it might look like, something like this. So I'm doing this public finance group. All right. So this sort of gives a scope of what the group does: underwrite and structure bond transactions for states and municipalities from 5 million to 2 billion. And this sort of is very descriptive. So one of the things that's a question is, well, couldn't I just put my resume in here, or should this be different from my resume? Because the resume is the very next piece of the application. And the answer is yes, you can, especially if you are tight on time. But you don't have as many words here. And basically what they're trying to understand here is sort of a broad overview of what you do. It's sort of just like, okay, high level, what are the key pieces of what you do? And you don't have that many words to do it in. So this would be something, moving along with this example. All right, let's see if it works. Let's see. So I'm going to work with clients to structure bond deals based on current market conditions. So just an overview of what my work looks like, right? I'm sitting here and I'm trying to figure out, okay, how do we issue these bonds, perform financial analyses, develop marketing documents, presentations, and reports, right? So if this is what my bread and butter is, I could put them in. If there are some things like oversee interns, then I could oversee interns, whatever it is, just high level understanding of what you're going to do. If you are currently, in reason for leaving, basically you want to talk about the opportunity that you see in the future, not just the job that you're basically, the reason I'm leaving isn't because I hate my job, but because I see in this next opportunity something better. So I wanted to move over to, to public finance, sales and trading, because in order to move at a faster pace or really understand the financial markets more deeply, something like that might work. If this is the job that you have before even going to business school, then you actually want to put in here something that talks about why you're leaving your job and why you want to go to business school. So really, why B school? So here's an example that I put together just so you can take a look. All right, so I'm imagining I am investment banking. I got invited right after college to go through this analyst program. So I'm starting my third and final year in the analyst program. I realized I want to make a more direct impact on the operations of government. Business school is the best way to build this managerial and leadership skill set. So it doesn't have to be flowery over the top. Just, okay, here's where I am in my career now. Here's what I want to be doing next. And here's kind of the value that business school has. And we're going to talk about business school some more in a little bit. But that's sort of a kind of brief synopsis of what that looks like. All right, let me just double check for questions that might have come in. Let's see. Bailey's asking, do I have to submit every test attempt? I actually don't remember off the top of my head. However, what I do want to share is that if you do have to submit every test, know that schools appreciate progression. And I think actually there's a reporting section. I'm sorry, going back to it. There's a reporting section we just put in your overall score and your percentile scores. So when you submit your application, they're basically going to be, looking at that first, and then so just your best score, and then I think afterwards, if you have to submit all of them, I don't think it'll matter too much at that stage, because again, if you show improvement, it just shows that you've improved your scores, and what they care about in terms of performance is your top score. And if you have to take it more than once, it just shows that you have grit and perseverance and everything else. All right. It says 9 required fields were not completed, so I'm just going to hit cancel on this one. Any questions on this employer section, just feel free to drop me a note and let me know. And I'll come back to this piece about company I founded or not. The reason they have this basically is a startup isn't because they're going to do employer verification. If they can't find the company, they will, they'll basically reference that. So, all right, so let's take a look here. We'll come back to it. So the resume, SOM has a resume template. You don't have to use their resume template for your resume, but you should take a look at it and make sure that your resume is at least somewhat of a similar style, so that it's not completely different, because what they're used to looking at is the SOM resume template. Always, always, always make sure to post your resume in here as a PDF. It's the same as your essays as a PDF. And not as a Word document or anything else, in which the formatting can get a little messy. All right, so if you do have any gaps in terms of your work experience, there's just a short essay opportunity here. And basically there's really 2 opportunities here. The first is if there's some sort of adverse event that happened, you can be honest with it and say, I lost my job at the beginning of the COVID pandemic, and it took me a while to get placed into a new position, and that left a gap in my resume of a period of 6 months. And then you can even say, during that time, I engaged in the following activities. So you're welcome to include that kind of piece and fill it in. Don't be afraid to explain these things, and just use examples of how any sort of negative, if it's a negative, be honest, simple, don't go crazy. And if there's an opportunity to express it in a positive way, find the positive. Talk about what you did during those 6 months of COVID that you were unemployed. All right, this next question is one of your letters of recommendation from a current supervisor or your most recent supervisor if you are not currently employed? So the reason they want your current supervisor is because they should probably know you pretty well. So what are some good reasons that you don't want to share your current supervisor? Well, one is you don't want your employer finding out that you're applying to business school. So if the answer is no, is your recommendation, then you can say, asking my current employer for a recommendation would put my employment at risk, and that's enough. Or my current supervisor recently moved into the job just a few weeks ago and doesn't know me that well. My prior supervisor knew me for a period of 2 years, so I've asked them to write instead. Those are perfectly fine things to say. All right, so this one is, if you are an entrepreneurial venture, a pretty big eye-opener. And it says, are you the founder of a company? Now, what you're going to see here is they dive pretty deep, right? They want you to understand what's the product that you're solving, what's your role in the team, what's the scope of the venture, public articles. They're basically trying to find out, for those of you who are old enough to have seen the movie Knocked Up, is this like a hang out with your friends and drink beer, not really running a business? Or is this an actual business that you actually ran, that understood customer needs and solved the problem, that had to go at it? So that's why they're asking all these questions, but it's pretty detailed. It does, if you were running a business, it does give you a really nice opportunity to articulate it and describe it and get lots of words around that story. But know that they're not just going to say, oh, I ran an e-commerce shop. It made me, for a few weeks in the summer and it made a few $100, right? They're looking for something like that. And it's okay to have a small business, by the way, and sort of speak to it on that level. All right, let's see what we have next. Oh, great, a question. So is the experience of opening a franchise restaurant as a side job worth to mention somewhere in the application? I would say yes, that is a pretty substantial accomplishment, right? I mean, uh, that's not going to be something that you can do overnight. That's so yes, you can definitely include that. Um, in lots of places, it could be the topic of your essay if it was a really challenging experience. It could go on your resume under additional experience. It could definitely go in that entrepreneurial section. And it could also go in the activities section that comes in just a few minutes. So yes, definitely that is of a scale that's, if you can have an interesting conversation about your entrepreneurial venture, it is worth including in your application for sure, because it makes you, in terms of the SOM application, what they're looking for is three things, right? Are you, I guess a few things, but are you smart, driven, interesting, right? And do you care about the world? Do you care about SOM? So, uh, you know, this restaurant franchise would make you an interesting candidate. So definitely include that. All right, so this is that first really surprise essay that's buried in this application. And some schools give you 500 words to talk about your career interests. As Bruce describes in the application guide, Bruce is the dean of SOM admissions. They are trying to be very, very succinct and clear in terms of what they describe and talk about. So they just give you 150 words. They really want you to have a very succinct plan. Now, you don't have to have the next 30 years of your life mapped out, but you do want to have a pretty precise plan of what you want to do right after business school and why, and sort of a general idea of what your long-term vision is for your future. So here's just a short example of that. All right, let's bring it in. All right. My interest in healthcare consulting stems from past experiences across healthcare, including physician recruiting, disability, law, and senior living. So notice how they're talking about the sources of their interest, the why, and that they've actually had some thought into it. These experiences underscore gaping challenges faced by underserved patients, hospitals, and regions. My goal is to lead healthcare providers and payers to create strategic initiatives and partnerships that improve patient experience and healthcare accessibility. So you can see this is, there are a couple of places it talks about long-term plan, but this is overall vision, right? Which is really the most important thing, is that you have a why, you have a drive and a place that you're going. Previously, my work focused on making healthcare more accessible, such as aligning staff with resident care preferences and using technology to engage residents. And I'm transitioning from learning and development to healthcare strategy to make systemic changes. Post MBA, I plan to join a top strategy consulting firm's healthcare practice. That means, hey, SOM admissions office, this is who I'm going to be talking to when the recruiters start showing up the first week of school. This is who I'm going to be going to meet. So I'm not going to be jumping around to lots and lots of different things. If that happens, it does. But the plan is strategy consulting in terms of healthcare. And long term, prepare me for launching my own consultancy. All right. So now, will this happen or not? Or launching consultancy, maybe, maybe not, but we'll see. The other thing that they did a nice job is they just fit in very brief, and I was a couple words over in this description. To build my knowledge, I'll take entrepreneurship and analytical courses at SOM and public health courses at YSPH. So you can see they were able to fold in their interest in healthcare and SOM very briefly in here. Now, one of the things that's really important is that you have a cogent plan. So for example, if you've been teaching at Teach for America, you don't want to say my first job out of business school is going to be private equity, because you don't necessarily have the quantitative and analytical skill set after Teach for America to do private equity transactions. But if you said short term, I want to be doing investment banking and transition to private equity, that makes a lot of sense. Or similarly, you wouldn't be jumping from being a military infantry officer straight into doing, a technology startup, high-tech startup, running sort of the tech platform. But you might move into, a non-tech role at, Google or another big tech firm like that. just sort of, and then move over there. So as long as your plan makes sense and you have some clarity about where you're going, even if it changes a little bit, that's really what they're looking for here. All right, so any questions on this essay? It is not a lot of words. That's the biggest challenge of doing this, so you have to be really clear. All right, something else here. Does your interest involve being an entrepreneur within the first 3 years post-MBA? What I would say is that unless you are really, really certain that you want to be an entrepreneur, the answer should be no. The reason is that post-MBA is a time that you're going to be collecting very valuable experience, let's say generalist experience, and that resume building experience is going to be valuable for your future going forward. All right. And the other piece is that business schools are measured in terms of salary pre and post MBA. So the extent that entrepreneurship is an unclear salary piece, that you don't want to say, yeah, I'm going to do something that's risky unless you're very, very determined to do it. All right.
And Alan, if you don't mind, I was just going to ask that quick question from Ms. Audrey. So what about transitioning from corporate banking to management consulting with a focus in financial services? Does that make sense? I've been bit whether you might not be clear.
So Audrey, in terms of transitioning from banking to management consulting, especially with a financial services, focus on it, that's really very, very aligned. You would have absolutely nothing to worry about there. And even if there wasn't, I mean, that's a very strong alignment. So no sweat whatsoever. I mean, you already have some of the financial services background, so I think that's great. And for some folks, it can be even a bigger step. And if it is a really big step, let's say it is that, let's say you want to do a startup and you've been doing a high-tech startup and you've been an infantry officer, going back to that example, if outside of your military experience, you've also been studying technology, let's say you've been an avid, studier of I guess AI is kind of the flavor of the week this week, or blockchain or anything else, then you can talk about how outside of your professional life, these are things that have been a focus of your attention. So yeah, as long as you have a clear reason and some background, you should be good. And Audrey, you're in great shape, so not to worry there. All right, so this is another optional essay that comes up in terms of joint degree. This is just basically saying, in terms of my goals around, let's say, sustainability, my focus is to have not just the business knowledge, but an understanding of ecosystems and the impact that our systems can have. So basically a conversation of here's why these two pieces fit very well together. And it's just 150 words. It doesn't have to be anything too fancy. Employer sponsorship. So employer sponsorship means that your company said, hey, we will pay for your MBA as long as you plan on coming back for some period of time afterwards. Some banks and consulting firms offer employer sponsorship. A few others do as well. Now, if you are 100% sure you're going to be sponsored, then you want to click yes. The reason is that it is reassuring, a couple of things, but it's reassuring to the admissions office that you have a very clear plan of where you're going to be after business school, right? So you are a sure bet in a lot of ways. The other thing is, it's not a guaranteed thing that people get sponsorships. The fact that you've been extended sponsorship means that your company really likes you. And so it is a sort of a feather in your cap to say, yes, I've already been sponsored. Now, if you do click yes, you're not going to be offered any of the kind of merit scholarships that MBA programs do offer when you have a strong application. So just know that there's a downside of doing that. But there are some upsides if you are in the position to be sponsored. All right, so recommendations. Basically, recommenders give a window into understanding who you are that the school does not understand without that perspective. Now, one of the things that we work on at Vantage Point is making sure that you as an applicant prepare your recommender for the process. You don't just say, hey, can you write me a letter of recommendation? They say yes. And you basically hope that they're going to write you a strong letter of recommendation. Remember that even your boss, who knows you pretty well, only knows, just whatever is on the top of their mind, whatever's most cogent in terms of their memory, right? But they may not realize all the work that you did in terms of a certain thing, or they may have forgotten, because even though you spent 2 months every day putting in 10, 15 hours, they went home with their family and they forgot that, right? They forgot the 2 months that you didn't sleep. So after you ask for your recommendation from your recommender, you do want to have a conversation with them, or at least provide them just some notes in terms of, hey, here's the stuff that we did together, so that they have a sense of kind of what you accomplished with them and everything else. You don't want to, you don't want to write that for them by any means, even if they push on you. But you do want to make sure that they remember what you did and they're able to speak to the things that are important accomplishments for you, because their perspective will not be the same as yours. Yeah, definitely in terms of Vantage Point, MBA, I would say, and myself as an admissions consultant, I would say that recommendations are a piece that matter a lot, but often get overlooked. And the other thing that's nice as an admissions consultant is, you can ask your recommender to sort of share your letter with an independent source. That could be us as admissions firms. Say, hey, listen, if you give Alan all 10s on the recommendation form, they're going to think that you weren't taking this seriously. So you really have to, be more honest in terms of things, areas that they do have improvements. They are going to school to learn things. All right. So any questions about recommenders in general? Your direct supervisor is great. You don't necessarily need the president of the company who you've only spoken to once to write you a letter of recommendation. You really want the person who knows you well to create a good letter for you. All right, in terms of activities, so SOM wants smart, driven, interesting people. And smart, interesting, driven people are going to have stories to tell about what they do during their hours, outside of work, or during their hours outside the classroom, as opposed to just in the classroom, as opposed to just work. They only give you up to 2 slots for each of these activities. And I would strongly encourage you to use both of these slots and fill them in. Now, they don't have to be absolutely incredible things, but you do want to fill them in a way that's integrity. And I'm going to take a couple minutes and fill these in. And as I do, I just want you to encourage you to think about what might be examples for yourself to do as well. All right. So let's take a look. So myself, I was in a fraternity when I was an undergrad. So I'm actually going to put that in. And I can put in that I was an officer in the fraternity. And I'm just going to put in member and officer instead of brother and officer. All right. And let's see. So in terms of my leadership roles, school was about 30 weeks and 5 hours per week, nothing fancy there. I was the rush chair, VP of Internal Affairs. All right. So again, this is a fraternity. So you're like, really, fraternity? But as a rush chair, I organized 7 events over a 2-week period, overseeing a budget of was $15,000, and all right, members. All right, so you can see, right, this is, and notice I'm trying to use very specific numbers here in terms of my accomplishments in my fraternity, right? If I have them, I'm going to use them. Now, again, I don't remember exactly what my budget was, if it was $14,000 or $20,000, but I'm going to want to use those numbers to my advantage if I have them. And then I did research, undergraduate research, so I can talk about what I did as a research assistant. In terms of my post-undergraduate activities, I was an ESL teacher, but I'm not going to include that here. But the other example is, okay, well, I taught ESL 2 nights a week. Other than that, I guess I was kind of a gym rat, right? But I'm not going to say gym rats. But I spent a lot of time in the gym. I now have kids. It's been a long time since I've spent so much time at the gym. But I could put weightlifting, right? And I don't know if you have to put in roll or not. Someone is asking, can I add a leadership activity for my graduate school? So yes, you can definitely include it either, depending on where your slots are, you could sort of cheat and put it undergrad, or you could put it in your post-undergrad. You could definitely do a post-undergraduate, right? So, and I can either leave this blank or just put participants. And this is something, if I'm doing weightlifting, let's say 5 hours per week, 50 weeks per year, then I could say, benched, increased benching weight, 140 pounds to 200 pounds, right? So, okay, so this is me being a gym rat. But this is actually shows that this was a committed activity in which I was seriously engaged, or running club, participant and event coordinator. And let's this, and twice per week. Members, cheating. All right, so again, right, this is sort of like, okay, I'm organizing a happy hour. Well, that actually takes some thought and attention. And if you negotiate deals with local bars for drink specials, that's a skill that, it takes a little bit of moxie, and it's a very, very valuable skill for business school. So I'm able to kind of put that in as well. So feel free to put in things that are a little bit less traditional. There's one young lady who her business put her on exchange to Scandinavia, to Sweden, and she spent a lot of her time exploring the culture of Sweden. I would include that as one of her post-undergraduate activities, because it makes her a more interesting candidate, and really it's sort of a committed thing that she did every single week, was getting to understand this culture of this other country. And again, notice you don't have that many words, but it is important. And this is also one of those things that in your resume, you may not give as much air to breathe, but here actually you have more room than you otherwise would. So take advantage of it and talk about what you did to make yourself more full-fledged and interesting. All right, so there's a separate presentation on the essay question. So I'm not going to dive too far into that today. But the key thing in terms of putting together the essay is that you really want a strong, coherent story. So here's where I started. Here's kind of the challenge that I faced. Here are the steps that I did to overcome that. Often those are their own stories. And they don't necessarily have to be work stories. That's perfectly okay. It can be completely out of work again. And sort of here's now where I am and what I've accomplished. So 500 words gives you a lot of room for that 5-paragraph essay. It could be 7 body paragraphs with introduction and conclusion. And I really want to encourage you to make sure that the story that you tell is an interesting story and gives them an understanding of who you are, that you have passion, motivation, that you care about the world, right? That you have that commitment to something that'll make you a good leader for business and society, as the school likes to describe. So I'm not going to get into that here, but if you do have questions about the essay, by all means, just drop it in. I'd be happy to share it with you. All right, so background information. So we've gone through a number of changes recently in terms of trying to get individuals of diverse backgrounds into the school. And so this is sort of where we are, is, well, let's get individuals who've got different stories to tell as being part of our community. Now, obviously, we are who we are. So, the best thing that you can do is just own that story and speak to it in a nice way. You can see this pretty standard information about your childhood, basically your schools, where you grew up. Nothing here that's that unusual. you're not sure, by the way, about your income for family, you can say don't know or decline to answer. That's perfectly okay. And then, this is just really pretty straightforward question. That being said, so there are things here that are noteworthy, right? Not that aren't going to show up in your resume, but are going to show that you have accomplished something. So being a caregiver for another individual at a young age is a pretty amazing accomplishment, and a really interesting story to tell. So actually, you could include it as part of that larger essay that you're sharing before. Or if you don't have that, that's okay. But these are pretty significant responsibilities. So if you have a substantial outside of work, responsibility for other people, it's worth mentioning that. SOM is a very welcoming community in terms of inviting partners in and things like that. New Haven is a relatively easy place to live in a lot of ways, and so it makes it easy for partners to relocate there as well. So if you have a partner that's coming, definitely feel free to include them. All right, last piece that I want to share with you is this supplementary detail. If you'd like to elaborate on any of your responses in this section or any other aspect of your background, we encourage you to do so here. So in terms of my own story, right, I grew up in northern New Jersey, middle class, upper middle class, nothing crazy in terms of my story that'll make me show I've overcome adversity or that I have a unique background. So should I leave this section blank? No, I shouldn't. This is still an opportunity for me to talk about myself and add a little bit of color that otherwise wouldn't be there. I mean, if I'm absolutely having the most boring life ever, I guess I could leave it blank. But my life has been very blessed, and so I'm going to share that in this supplementary detail. If you are a parent or a partner, you're welcome to include that in your story. If you grew up with dogs and you're now the owner of dogs and they're coming with you to business school, you're welcome to make that part of your story. The brief story that I put in here. I was fortunate to grow up with a strong, healthy family where the basic needs of life were always secure. Education always been paramount to my parents and guardians, with many people chipping in for my education from preschool onwards. All right, so so you'll see in terms of, if I were filling this out for myself, in terms of the family contribution, right, it's pretty high. And so this is sort of a way to describe that it wasn't just my parents doing that, but other folks as well that made that possible for me. My schools integrated academics with visual and performing arts and the study of world cultures, which has given me a creative streak, an insatiable curiosity and desire to understand the world. And I was raised in the conservative movement of Judaism, which has embedded in me the principle of tikkun olam, repair the world. I think I misspelled it. Yep, principle of tikkun olam, repair the world. Given the blessings of my life and the gifts I've been given, I find myself seeking opportunities for tikkun olam in everyday moments, big and small. Okay, so this, you can see, as I said, I don't have any very crazy story, but I am able to take parts of my identity and say, hey, look, this is why this identity that I've had fits very well with the ethos of the school. I mean, that's part of it, but also just a flavor of who I am in general. Like you'll see, I know hundreds and hundreds of kids songs and songs that I could sing to you. And I could probably put that in there, I guess, to make an interesting flavor on it as well. So yes, don't be afraid of doing that for sure. All right, a couple other quick things that are not in this application itself, but are part of what comes next, is to pay the fee. If you're part of a number of groups, you don't have to pay the fee. If your income is below a certain level, they'll waive the fee. If you are, if you've done military service or Teach for America or the Peace Corps, they will also waive the fee. And then there is a video question or video questions. Basically, this is sort of a hot seat, 90-second questions, and they give you an opportunity to practice beforehand. The best way to kind of get familiar with this process is just to practice. Make sure you make eye contact and are comfortable, and really sort of reread your application. Kind of think about things like, okay, the tell me about myself question, and a couple other kind of basic ones just to talk through if you have them. They may come up, they may not. The biggest reasons that they're asking these questions, first is are you generally articulate? The second is, especially for international folks, do you have a level of English that demonstrates that you'll be able to communicate effectively with other people in the classroom? So that's a big piece of it, is just communication abilities, and they're just trying to understand kind of who you are as a person a little bit. And the next is this behavioral assessment. They've been doing this for a very long time and basically collecting research data on it. It's something done by ETS, which I think is the folks who administer the SAT. And Bruce says elsewhere in the application, originally for a long time, it's just been kind of research purposes. Now they're trying to use it as a supplement to saying, okay, this person's quant scores are a little bit low, or their GMAT scores are a little low, or their GPA is a little low. Is there, given that that's the case, are there other things that we could predict them being academically successful anyway, right? So they're trying to basically remove as many barriers as they can to having a diverse and interesting class. And so that's the reason they have this behavioral assessment in there. Nothing you need to study for really or anything else. But that's basically it. All right, so let me check in with y'all and see what questions.
There's one more question that came up from Bailey.
So Bailey asked, could I use dog ownership as an activity? I go to dog park 3 times a day, every day, and we coordinate events for the pups. Yes, you could absolutely do that, right? I mean, that is a serious commitment. So a dog park 3 times a day, every day, and coordinating events, that absolutely would work as an activity by all means. And it's a pretty fun one. I'm sure if you had it in an interview and an admissions interview, and they saw your application and they got to talk about dogs with you, that'd be a great resonant place. So. Well, what else could be helpful for you all? Yes, if you found this session helpful, by the way, please feel free to like and subscribe to the channel. Vantage Point MBA, by the way, we do offer a free consultation if you have any questions, or if you want somebody to sort of talk through the process of MBA admissions. You can definitely reach out to us. We are here to help.
And Bailey, thank you for your response. Thank you, Alan. I do follow up based on the previous question, Alan. In terms of, I think this was in the supplemental text box, supplemental information. Does that have to be completely new information that you haven't put anywhere else in the essay, essay number 1, essay number 2, or elsewhere? Or is that supplemental information for the supplemental detailed text box there? Is that new information that you haven't talked about anywhere else in any other essays? Or is this other aspects of your background that you want SOM to know?
So in terms of the supplemental details, this section, and by the way, there is an additional essay. So I sort of skipped this, but just to jump back a step. If there is something in your background that you feel like needs to be discussed further, that isn't, so there are some opportunities, like if you got, again, you were involved in a criminal justice situation, there's an optional essay for that. But if there's some sort of negative feature of your application that you feel is important to have a conversation about, you can provide a short essay here, right, about that. That's completely optional. If you don't have an adverse event that you kind of have to speak to, then you don't fill in this optional information essay here. So that's a separate essay. In terms of this supplemental essay, it could overlap with the themes that you've already had. So in terms of telling the story, right, you don't want to be saying, okay, in the first essay, you're talking about saving the world. And in this supplemental detail, you can talk about how your family has contests for making the biggest pile of trash you can when you're on vacation, right? So you don't want to create something that's disparate. You want some sort of integration. If there is some overlap between this essay and your other essays, that's great. Don't be afraid of basically making connections in the story for them. Remember, they are reading lots and lots of applications and doing it very, very fast. So if there is some overlap, that's great. And to the extent that you can add just a little bit of additional color on who you are, that's really what the opportunity is, right? My core essay is not going to be about Tikkun Olam. I guess it could be. There are other people who are maybe So this piece of it, in terms of just my story, in terms of sort of this kind of creative kind of streak that I have, it may not come up in a different place. So this is just an opportunity to share that where otherwise wouldn't. So yes, it can integrate, but it should be a little bit different.
Okay, I'm going to put another comment up. Thank you for that response. This is from She. I believe I'm hopefully pronouncing that right. How should we determine which prompt to answer? For example, involvement in the immigrant community to address the community prompt, or a commitment to helping other immigrants.
So, I would say, in terms of involvement in the immigrant community or a commitment to helping other immigrants, it feels like sort of 6 in one hand, half dozen in the other. I mean, if you were talking about, so going back to the essays real quick. Describe the biggest commitment you've ever made. Why is it meaningful to you? And what actions have you taken to support it? Describe the community that's been most meaningful to you, most valuable thing you've gained to be part of it, and describe the most significant challenge you faced. So what I would say, is, you could do either one. I would think a commitment, when I think of the idea of the commitment, I think of it being sort of a challenge that you've had to overcome, right? So for example, let's say you've decided to be a competitive diver. There's challenges built into that about getting up early, traveling, things like that. So in terms of the community involvement piece, if you want to talk about sort of challenges that the community has faced or ways that you support the community through sort of adversity or things like that, I might just use that prompt. If it talks about sort of the give and take of the community and what it means to you, sort of the impact that you've made, or because you've been a part of this community, the things that you've done together with the community to make a difference. So for example, if I was as part of a synagogue that basically was, we traveled to Mississippi when there was flooding and helped with flooding recovery and did some other things along the way. Sort of the community as a group and kind of the give and take through that community, I might use the second one. So I could think you could go either way. The first one I think of as your commitment requiring sort of challenges that you had to overcome, and the community sort of being something that you've done kind of with the give and take and taken actions through that community as sort of as a group. So I hope that clears it up for you.
And then one other question from Nitesh on education system. It providing scores and percentages and not in GPAs. How should we, in terms of Indian applicants, check their GPA conversions?
So, Mitesh, because SOM has dealt with, has had applicants from all over the world. You wouldn't be the first to have gone through the Indian education system, so they will have some familiarity. So you want to keep it in percentages, and you do not want to change it to GPA. When you submit your GPA, you want to submit it in percentages, and then you want to give them a link, that basically, and a description if you have it, to talk about what it is, right? So let's see where it is. This is in terms of grading. So basically, so what you want to be able to do is explain it to them so that they understand what the grading does. And I'm pretty sure though that the grading in terms of percentages is going to be a little bit steeper than it would be in terms of US GPA.
Thank you.
Sure. All right, and looks like Mitesh had another question.
I'll pull that up for you.
All right, there you are. So are there any specific areas that one should cover in the optional essay? I know this is subjective, but knowing specific things will benefit to strengthen the application. So again, there are, Mitesh, I'm going to assume that this is the optional essay in this section here. So in that case, and I'll go back to the family one in a moment, but in that case, unless there's an adverse event that you want to speak to. And there are other opportunities, like if you were let go from a job or something like that, there are kind of opportunities elsewhere in the application to include it. But if there's an adverse event that you want to put some language around and explain what happened, then use this essay. Otherwise, you don't use the essay. So unless there's something like, oh, this was really tricky, I needed to explain it, then use this optional section. So looks like I'm pulling up lots of things. In terms of background information, in terms of this supplemental detail, right? What you want to do here is basically talk through your story in a way that's interesting, right? So it doesn't have to be crazy though. Don't drive yourself crazy, right? I've part of a family of 4 other children. We had 4 children. My grandparents were a big part of my upbringing. We learned traditional culture and stories, and things like that. You can tie that in. So the goal here is to say, hey, I'm not a completely blah person who has no color or life to share. So, all right. So I hope that helps, Nitesh. But yeah, this is just additional color. So Smiran asked a question, which is, does the admissions committee see the GPA and grades of each course in detail? So here is the academic record. So basically what they're going to do is they can ask for an unofficial transcript from your school, right? So you can take a look at what your school, however your school provides this transcript. And this could be courses in addition to the courses that you did during your undergraduate period, right? So if you took, let's say, an additional quantitative skills course outside of college, that would definitely behoove you to include it. But whatever the transcript document is, when you log into the website and can kind of download the piece, that's what they will see is that document. So take a look at the school and see what they include and offer. All right. Oh, AJ, I can't hear you. I'm sorry.
I apologize. I believe that was the last question from Samir, and he does say thank you for your response. So thank you very much for that, Alan. Waiting to see if any other questions pop up. But that does bring up an hour, and we're about an hour and 2 minutes in. Do you have any other last points that you'd like to make, Alan?
So I think, the only other piece that I didn't chat about in terms of SOM as an institution is when we look at the curriculum of SOM, they have this concept of an integrated curriculum. So it's not just marketing, but it's the customer experience. So it integrates marketing and operations together and some other things, right? What's the experience of a customer interacting with the business? And I think that sort of speaks to this idea of this holistic concept of education. So not just business and not just society, but them integrated together. And so when you think about your application and the story that you want to tell, I definitely just think about that integration and how you see things holistically, and how, if you don't have that broader picture, SOM's a place to do that. And it's okay to acknowledge that in your application, say, one of the things I want to get out of SOM is this broader and fuller picture.
Thank you very much for that, Alan. I really appreciate it. And for subscribers and the YouTube watchers, I really appreciate your session information as well. Thank you everyone for joining the How to Fill Out Yale SOM MBA application information session today. And thank you, Alan, for your time.
Sure thing. Thanks, AJ. Thanks, everybody, for taking the time to be here today.
Thank you. Happy to have it. Thank you.